class. Kevin is a graduate of the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communications from the University of Georgia. He's also one of the founding board members of the Glenn County Sports Hall of Fame. I've had the pleasure of knowing Kevin probably going on about 20, 25 years now. And it's always been a pleasure to work with him. We did some radio work together. He did some interviews when we covered sports events. And I don't say this lightly. I have the utmost respect for him. And I want y'all to all welcome Mr. Kevin Price.
Thank you. Just to see who I'm talking to here, how many freshmen do I have in the room? Any freshmen? Everybody's been through high school before? Sophomores? There we go. Juniors? Seniors? All right, good deal. You're on the back end. Congratulations. First of all, let me just say this. I appreciate Mr. Neal inviting me here. I think we're going to kind of do a back and forth Q&A. He's going to kind of lead me into some answers, and hopefully we'll have a chance to let you guys ask some questions. But let me just say this. When I went to high school here in Glenn County, there was no Golden Isles Career Academy. And thinking back, I kind of wish there was, particularly in journalism area. I know some of you are graphic arts students. A lot of the rules that apply to writing and broadcasting also apply to you guys as well, maybe just in a little different way. But I'm glad to see the broadcast students in here. I don't know whether you're interested in going into writing or television or radio, but I would have loved to have been in your shoes in high school when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. I got a little bit of experience at Brunswick High. I went to Brunswick High with a magazine called Rise and Surf. I'm not sure if that even exists anymore, but
No,
it was a literary magazine where basically we wrote short stories, poems, all kinds of things like that, and it got published in the spring of the year. But that was basically my journalism experience in high school. So if you are really serious about maybe going into graphic arts, going into something in the journalism field, you're in the right place here at GICCA. You can only learn so much in the classroom as far as textbook type stuff, teachers standing up lecturing you for 30 and 45 minutes. I know that gets boring, but the hands-on experience that you guys are getting here is going to be very valuable if you try to go to a tech school or something for college, or if you go to a university or college, you're ahead of the game. You're ahead of the curve. So I really encourage you to listen to your teachers, and when you come here, be serious about it, particularly if you're serious about going into this profession, because the experience you get is invaluable. It's going to help you get into college. It's going to get you ahead of the curve on other kids that are maybe interested in the same type of thing. And then at college, yes, go to class, do all those things, but get out and work in the field. And there's no substitute for experience. So if you're halfway serious or thinking about going into something like this, you're in the right place.
Well, thank you. Yeah, like I said, this is going to be kind of me asking him some questions. I might have caught him a little off guard because I didn't send him the questions beforehand, but I just kind of want to quickly kind of go through it. Now, one of the reasons that I wanted to have this is because, again, y'all know that I want a bigger social media footprint when it comes to the Golden Isles College and Career Academy. And that was one of the things when I called Kevin to talk to him about coming to speak to our class. I said I want to talk about the impact of social media on journalism and things like that. So we're going to dig right into it. The very first question is, I know when we had our conversation, you said that there's this kind of scoop mentality. And with social media being so immediate, sometimes journalists want to get that story out there first, and I'll just kind of let you elaborate on that a little bit.
Okay, first of all, is there anybody in this room who is not on social media? That's what I thought. How many of you have more than one social media account? That's what I thought too. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are on Facebook?
It's starting to be an old person.
That's good. I was about to say that's starting to be mine and Hilton's generation. Twitter? Yep. That's even dying out, I believe, a little bit with kids y'all's age. Is that right? What Instagram? Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Pictures and videos,
Looks
right?
like we're going to have to get instant.
Yeah. Snapchat. All right. Kind of where I'm going is, do y'all see immediacy? Y'all want to see those pictures? Y'all want to see those videos? You've got a short attention span. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but that's where journalism is headed in general. Probably 10, 15 years ago, have any of y'all ever heard of the USA Today? They were kind of out in front of the curve where shorter stories, bullet point type stories, not these long exposés. And from there, it's kind of gone to quick hits, clickbait, social media. Social media is good and bad. I know y'all know that. Getting off tangent a little bit, just be careful. Be careful with your own social media. You know, especially you seniors getting ready to go to college. You might be getting ready to get a job. You might be working a job after school, on weekends. Employers look at that stuff. That's a way to look into your past, look at what you've done, see if you are a good fit for their company. So be careful with what you post. I know we all like to have fun and pictures and videos and whatnot, but just realize when you mash that button, it's just like talking to a reporter. It's on record, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can go back and erase it and things like that sometimes, but sometimes that stuff can still be found. There's been cases of athletes, for instance. They did something when they were in high school, and now that they're 30 years old in the NFL, in Major League Baseball, things are coming back to haunt them. Now, that's unfortunate, but that's just the world we live in. But that said, social media can be a good thing in the journalism world. First of all of you guys have social media. So let's say after school today, you're driving down Highway 17, you see a wreck out there that might involve a school bus or just a two-car collision. You can immediately get on social media, and everybody around town knows about that wreck.
Pull over the side of the road.
Yeah, right.
Don't know why you drive.
Hands-free, exactly.
Okay.
And then everybody in the community knows about that car wreck. They don't have to wait for Kevin Price, the journalist, to show up on the scene. So that's kind of a good thing. But even there, you have to be careful. I mean, if it's a two-car fender bender, you certainly don't want to say, oh, it looks nasty, there's possibly 5 fatalities. No, that's the furthest thing from the truth. So even though you're just casual, you're Joe Blow, you still kind of got to be careful. You don't want to blow things out of proportion. Journalists, social media is a good thing for them as well. It's very easy for a journalist to get on their personal or their company's Facebook account, Twitter account, whatever the case may be, and just report the news. 2 or 3 quick little sentences, it's out there. But there's countless examples of bad journalism out there through social media. Let me give you a case in point. How many of you are University of Georgia football fans? All right, about half the room. How many of y'all know who Jake Fromm is, quarterback? All right. Well, there was an instance with him this summer. Of course, it's the off season for Georgia. They're back in school now. They're going through practice, getting ready to start. But he was involved in a water skiing accident. He was out on, I think, Lake Hartwell, I believe. Anyway, that's immaterial. And he wasn't skiing. He was in the back of the boat. Well, the person skiing let go of the rope, and it somehow got coiled up and came back and hit him on the left hand. All right, well, in this instant world of social media, somebody probably with him tweeted something out, and here it goes. All these little social media sites and websites that cover UGA football, they were all over it. Jake Fromm injured, big headlines on the social media account. Georgia's season might be in jeopardy. I understand the sensational headlines. That gets you to click on the story. That is what it is. But also, in their 2 or 3 paragraphs of the story, same kind of thing. Jake Fromm injured, left hand. Georgia hasn't even started the season yet. Their season might be wrecked. No. What happened was he had to get a few stitches, I believe, if I got the story, if I remember right. He was at voluntary practice the next day. He didn't miss a beat. But what happened, a couple of media agencies that I would call credible sources, they tweeted it out there, Facebooked it, yes, Jake Fromm has been injured, more details to come. They left it pretty blank, pretty vanilla. They were on the news, they were letting people know that they were on the story, but just bear with them, be patient. Well, within 30 minutes, they had all the details they needed. It was a minor accident, He wasn't the one skiing. The rope hit him in the hand. He needed stitches. He's going to be fine. He'll be back at practice tomorrow. Not going to miss a game, anything like that. Georgia's season is still fine. So you've got these social media sites. They're just trying to get all of you guys, called clickbait, get all of you guys to click, get hits. They can sell that stuff to their advertisers. Hey, we get X amount of hits a day. But they were way off base on the news. It was a minor incident. They blew it out of proportion. But the credible websites, the credible reporters out there, they stayed patient. They waited to get the details, and they told the story right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. All right, with social media, do you feel it's necessary to pay closer attention to the content, and when your audience, because like I said, it's instantaneous, sometimes people react emotionally to a story because they've skimmed through it, didn't read it in detail and everything. Do you feel a responsibility as a journalist to respond to them, or do you just kind of let your work stand for itself? That kind of makes sense, what I'm asking? Or do you try to say, well, you need to read the article? Do you get engaged with them on social media to try to limit their impact, I guess, on your feed?
Yeah, I guess, first of all, as a reporter, what you want to do is you want to be truthful and factual. There's no substitute for telling the truth, and there's no substitute for having your facts right. Unfortunately, the truth area gets a little bit crowded, a little bit cloudy these days because so many of your sources could possibly be not telling you the truth. They're telling you the side of the story they want you to hear. Your responsibility is to make sure and kind of check them, make sure they're accurate, and you maybe get another source to put in your story that may tell an opposite story. But as a journalist, yeah, you just want to make sure you got your facts right, you got your information right, and that you can stand by the story and that your news agency can stand by the story. If there gets to be some back and forth going on, that's sort of another issue in today's social media world. Everything's quick and easy, and sometimes real journalism gets lost. Stories are not as in-depth as they used to be. People just, take something out of a story and they spin it in their own way, and it goes wild on social media. They get their own following. They hijack the post, so to speak. So as a journalist, yeah, I guess you just kind of have to weigh the story. You want to stand behind your work, but you want to also make sure the audience does understand your intentions. So I would say you just kind of depending on the story, kind of depending on what the real truth of the matter is, you may get in some back and forth on social media to clarify things from your being a reporter, your news agency for why you reported this story, and just make sure again that people don't take things out of context and they understand the real intent of your story and your post.
Then, say, and I'm just saying, I know at one time you did work for the Brunswick News, and I'm assuming Brunswick News has a Facebook page. Would you, as a reporter, try to address that kind of stuff on that social media platform page, or would you do it within your personal, or do you keep your stuff personal and your professional social media separate?
Yeah, I tell you what I do. Actually, I guess I'm going to sort of tell a little bit of a fib right now. I'm working for a website right now called All on Georgia, and also it's All on Georgia Glenn. Basically what I'm doing right now is any story I write for those guys, I'm putting it on my own social media page. But basically all I'm doing is saying, hey, Glenn Academy plays Fort Dorchester last Friday night. Here's my story. Or Brunswick High is getting ready to play Bartram Trail out of Jacksonville this weekend. Here's my story. And just let people read it from there. What I'm thinking about doing, though, to answer your question, is create a separate account where my professional stuff stays separate from my personal stuff, where I don't have a bunch of who knows who coming to my personal page and possibly just doing whatever they want to do. And I would encourage any of you guys to do that, whether it's now in college or as soon as you get a job. Yeah, I mean, when I was at the college, I had an account, my own account, but also had a social media account on Facebook, on Twitter, that was just for my work stuff at the college. So anything I posted about our college athletics on any of they went to our social media accounts, our athletic department accounts, but I would also post things on my own account. But I just did it under my name, but as a separate account that was related to my work stuff, where people came to that just for my work stuff and not my own personal stuff.
Yeah, see, I made the cardinal sin of when I got a job with the Glenn County School System, they gave me an email account that represented my professional teaching, and every time somebody asked me for my email, I would give them that professional. So now when I get in the morning, I've got all my personal and my professional emails all mixed together, and sometimes it takes a while to dig through it. I would highly recommend that you have a personal email account that you deal with the personal business, and then you have a professional email account. That's the one you put on your resume. All right, that's the one you let people. This is how I deal with my professional business. All right. Do you think that the ability to make logical connections within a story is important? And if so, if yes, how so? And if no, how so? How do you think logical connection? If you want to explain what you think logical connections are.
Well, I asked Hilton or Mr. Neal for clarification on this when we were out in the hallway a minute ago, and it kind of goes back to the car wreck analogy. And I think that's kind of what he was getting at. Let's say it's a major accident on the causeway. There could be fatalities. Traffic's backed up for miles. It's kind of like you got one eye. You show up on the scene as a reporter, whether it's a print journalism reporter or somebody doing broadcast news or radio accounts. You show up, you try to find out. First of all, you probably would go to the police, people on the scene, find out all the facts. If there is fatalities, if people's been taken to the hospital, are kids involved, for instance? How did this happen? They're going to probably be very brief and vague, depending on where they are in their investigation and exactly what they know. But at least you have a background, the facts for the story. Then you start maybe talking to eyewitnesses, other people who were maybe traveling on the other side of the causeway and witnessed the accident. Maybe somebody was out jogging on the causeway and saw this happen right in front of their eyes. So kind of what he's saying, I think, is what do you believe when you have eyewitnesses telling you different things? Well, there's a sort of a saying in journalism, if you've got one eyewitness account, you need to give attribution to that say, let's just say this young man right here gives me, I saw the accident, here's what I saw. I need to say this is what he said. And it kind of stands on its own. If you have 2 or 3, 4, 5 people, several people saying the same thing, they saw this, they saw that, here's how this happened, here's how that happened, you can basically assume that that's a fact. Enough people saw it to where they're telling the story the same way, so you can make that a fact in your story. So I think that's what you're talking about as far as linking things together. If he's telling me one thing and this young lady here is telling me one thing, I probably need to keep those things separate. This accident happened, this is what he saw, she saw it a different way, and let that be what it is. Let that be the news, the 2 people telling 2 different stories. But if he's saying the same thing, she's saying the same thing, everybody over here was in the school bus that's going down the causeway and saw the accident happen in the other lane and they're saying the same thing, you can basically assume that that's what happened.
And then too, like I said, say he has 4 people over here telling him the same story, and all of a sudden this one person's kind of giving a totally different account of it. You have to analyze that on the spot almost.
Right.
And say, well, darn, who do I believe? Do I believe these 4 people, or do I believe this one person over here that's telling me a totally different story? Now, as a journalist, you know what I mean? There's certain aspects, curiosity, integrity, perseverance, getting the facts right is correct. Do I go with them, or do I make a decision to ignore him? All right, because he's the outlier, like that. Now, that kind of gets me into my next question. Is there a body or an organization that you belong to and you feel like another reporter is not being truthful or not? Can you report them, or is that pretty much the Wild West? You just got to tell your truth and let him tell his truth and let the public decide?
Yeah, let me just say it like this. This day and time, a lot of people can call themselves reporters. A lot of people can call themselves journalists. You can go home today and start a blog and call yourself a reporter or a journalist. You can go home and create a YouTube channel and do like broadcast news from your living room sofa and say this is the news coming out of Glenn County today. Well, that's good that you're ambitious and want to do that and whatnot, but there's a difference between calling yourself a reporter, calling yourself a journalist, and being a journalist. And in this day and time, it's a sort of a pet peeve of mine. There's so much bad journalism out there because people can create blogs, do this and do that, and call themselves a journalist. What you want to be as a journalist is you want to tell the truth, you want to be accurate, you want to have credibility, you want to give sort of like that, like with what we've talked about, both sides of the story. You want to be, you don't want to be biased towards one way or the other. You want to give both. If there's usually more than one side to a story, so you want to be fair, give everybody their chance. And so, in that standpoint, I think what happens, Hilton, is your credibility comes out. People start to know that, hey, this journalist, this organization, they're credible. If I get something from them, it's probably going to be right. It's probably going to be accurate. There's countless examples, like I said, of bad journalism, and it doesn't take long for an educated person to realize that this reporter, if he's acting alone, or this news agency, is not the real deal. What they're telling is sensationalized. It may not be the truth. If you're serious about wanting your news and real news, it's probably not coming from them. So really, I would just say, to answer your question, I would just kind of let them do their thing, let them kind of bury themselves, so to speak.
They'll rise to whatever level of accountability.
Right. And then hopefully people follow you for the news in Glenn County or the news in the state of Georgia because they know you're credible.
Gotcha. Yeah. Then this kind of leads into this question that I had. You hear people when there's some story that they feel like negative towards them or negative towards their organization or something like that. They'll say, "Well, that was a mistake. That journalist made that mistake." You know what I mean? If you do make a mistake within a story, it's often amplified with social media. All right. What is the journalist's responsibility to correct a mistake?
Yes, well, that's a very good question. And here's kind of the deal with that. Once things are in print, and I'll just go back to the newspaper. Once things are in print, it's in print. There's really no way to change it. Now, this day and time, just take the Brunswick News, for example, they may put a story out today as breaking news and put it on their website. Tomorrow, hopefully they've added some new information, found out some details, and write a story that's similar but different. It's up to date, and they publish it in the newspaper tomorrow morning. The good news is if they make a mistake in that online edition, well, it's just as easy as going back in, editing the thing on the back end, and redoing that story. If it's just a typo, something like that, they can probably get away with just doing that, not saying anything. But particularly when something's in print, yes, if your facts somehow got wrong, it could be simple as spelling somebody's name the right way, saying somebody's age. If you identify them with maybe working with somebody else and they're actually employed by somebody else, you're obligated in an integrity kind of way to go back and make a retraction and let people know, hey, there was a mistake in this story. We identified so-and-so as being from Brunswick, Georgia, but he's actually from Brantley County. And so, unfortunately, that only goes so far. Most people read that story and probably won't see the retraction you make in the newspaper the next day, but you are kind of professionally obligated to make those corrections.
Yeah, when I was doing a little research on news and stuff like that, I watched an interesting documentary, and it was talking about the news, how news has changed from like the 60s and 70s, when you only had 3 television stations, right? ABC, NBC, and CBS, I think.
Right.
And they had to, when it was the evening news, they had to write the story in such a way that whatever story they were reporting on, the facts would not change, because it might be 3 or 4 days later before the story aired.
Right.
But they would write it in such a way that the facts had to be set basically in stone, and then they would report that. And if the story changed, there would be no update on that story changing. But like I said, with social media and the advent of the modern communications, as soon as something can be updated, they usually update it.
Yeah, everything's instant.
Everything like that. Getting back to kind of the analytical skills, that's where you kind of, folks, that's where you kind of have to use your brain a little bit. As a journalist, how do you analyze a situation, and do you think about the implications of what you're writing? Do you think about how it's going to affect this person, how it's going to affect this organization? No matter, Now, I like stories that have a positive spin, but sometimes we live in a world where there's negative information that has to be told. Do you think about the implications, or you just, I write the story and this is truth at this time?
Well, let me kind of go back a little bit, then I'll answer your question. I'm not really going to throw the Jacksonville news under the bus, for instance, but I guess I will. If you go home and you watch the Jacksonville news tonight, if something's out of Glenn County, chances are it's not a positive story. A lot of the news agencies from Jacksonville, they'll cover Kingsland, they'll come on into Brunswick. That's really about as far as they go. Otherwise, they cover North Florida. But they're probably not coming here to tell a good story about what the students at GICCA are doing, quite honestly. They're coming here to cover the murder. They're coming here to cover the big car wreck on the causeway or something of that nature. That's sort of a pet peeve of mine and some of the other journalists in the area, that if you watch the Jacksonville news, you think, boy, Glenn County is a terrible place to live. Brunswick, Georgia, and St. Simons, nothing good ever happens there. Well, that's the furthest thing